Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me.
In the deepest shadows of the world, beyond the reach of human eyes, lay the Shadow Kingdom. It was a land hidden from reality, its people born from the darkness, their entire lives cast in shades of gray. The kingdom existed on the fringes of the real world, a reflection in every shadow on earth, but few ever knew of its existence. Those who did either feared it or tried to control it. For as long as anyone could remember, Nolmr had ruled the kingdom with an iron fist. He was a shadow sorcerer of immense power, feared by every citizen, even as they prepared for what should have been a hopeful moment, their first ever election. The citizens had never voted before. For years, Nolmr had held control, using his dark magic to dominate every aspect of life in the kingdom. But this time, there was talk of a shift, of something new, something that could break Nolmr's reign of terror. Still, the citizens cowered in fear, unsure if anyone could truly stand up to the president. The whispers of revolution were nothing but faint murmurs in the night. In a small corner of the capital city, Umbra, an ordinary shadow citizen named Selric lived a quiet life. Selric never considered himself a hero. He was no different from the countless other shadows who tried to live their lives under Nolmr's oppressive rule. He worked as a messenger, slipping through the narrow streets and darkened alleys, delivering news and parcels to those brave enough to communicate in secret. His best friend, Myra, was one of the few who believed change could come. She talked often about the coming election, about how they could break Nolmr's hold if they all worked together. But Selric, he didn't believe it was possible. One evening, as Selric made his way home through the twisting streets of Umbra, he found himself wandering deeper into the shadows than usual. It wasn't a path he'd taken before, but something seemed to pull him in that direction. The shadows grew darker, thicker, until they felt almost tangible, pressing against his skin. He shivered but continued on, drawn toward something unknown. It was there, in the depths of the shadowed alley, that he stumbled upon Ida Crystal, shimmering faintly with a light that seemed out of place in the Shadow Kingdom. Selric knelt, reaching out to touch it, his fingers trembling as they brushed against its surface. The moment he made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, unlike anything he'd ever felt. Light flooded his body, radiating from within, and for the first time in his life, he could feel the power of the light. He recoiled, terrified. Light was a dangerous force in the Shadow Kingdom. It was the one thing that could destroy them, the one thing Nolmr had warned them all about. But as the light faded, Selric realized something. He wasn't destroyed. He was a broken bar different. The power still coursed through him, and he could feel it, a warmth that contrasted the cold shadows around him. He hurried back to his home, heart pounding. Myra was waiting for him, as she often did, her bright eyes wide with curiosity when she saw his expression. "What happened?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. "Yeah, I don't know," Selric stammered. "I found something a broken bar powerful." He showed her the crystal, its faint glow dimmer now but still present. Myra's eyes widened, and she reached out, but Selric pulled it away. "Careful," he warned. "It's light." "Real light." Myra stared at him, disbelief in her eyes. "Light? How a broken bar? How is that possible?" "I don't know. But when I touched it, I felt it different." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the discovery hanging between them. Myra's mind raced, and she was the first to break the silence. "This could be the answer," she whispered. "If you can control light, you can challenge Nolmr. You could bring balance to the kingdom." Selric shook his head, fear creeping in. "Me? I'm just a messenger. I can't fight Nolmr. He's too powerful." "But you have something no one else has," Myra argued. "Light. He can't control that. It's the one thing that can stop him." Selric stared at the crystal, his mind spinning. He had never wanted to be involved in the political struggles of the Shadow Kingdom. He just wanted to live his life in peace, like everyone else. But now, with the power of light in his hands, he couldn't ignore the possibilities. If he could master this power, Maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. The days passed, and Selric began experimenting with the light, learning to control it. At first, it was small, barely a flicker in the darkness, but as time went on, he grew stronger. He could manipulate the light in ways he never thought possible, bending it to his will, using it to defend himself against Nulmra's enforcers, shadow beasts that prowled the streets at night, searching for anyone who dared to resist the president's rule. But as Selric's powers grew, so did Nulmra's awareness. The shadow sorcerer could feel a disturbance in the balance of the kingdom, and he sent his most trusted assassins to find the source of the light. It wasn't long before they found Selric. One night, as Selric and Myra made their way through the city, they were ambushed. The shadow assassins descended on them like a storm, their forms twisting and shifting, blending with the darkness. Selric barely had time to react, but his instincts kicked in, and he summoned the light, creating a barrier between them and their attackers. The light seared through the shadows, forcing the assassins to retreat, but they didn't give up easily. They circled around, trying to find a weakness in Selric's defenses, but he held firm, pushing them back again and again. Myra watched in awe as he fought, her hope growing with every strike. Eventually, the assassins fled, retreating into the shadows from which they had come. Selric collapsed to the ground, exhausted, but victorious. Myra rushed to his side, her eyes filled with admiration. "You did it," she whispered. "You fought them off." Selric shook his head, his body trembling. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. Nulmra will send more, stronger ones." "We have to act now," Myra insisted. "We need to take the fight to him before he destroys everything." Selric hesitated. He had barely survived this encounter. How could he possibly stand against Nulmra himself? But deep down, he knew Myra was right. The longer they waited, the stronger Nulmra would become, and the weaker their chances of success. They had no choice. They had to confront the president. With the help of the underground resistance, Selric and Myra began planning their attack. The resistance had been waiting for a leader, someone who could inspire them to rise against Nulmra's tyranny. Selric, with his newfound powers, became that leader, though he didn't feel worthy of the title. The night before the election, they made their move. Under the cover of darkness, they infiltrated Nulmra's fortress, the Obsidian Spire. It was a towering structure of pure shadow, its jagged edges cutting into the sky like the claws of a beast. Inside, Nulmra waited, confident in his ability to crush any rebellion. But Selric wasn't just any rebel. He was the light in the darkness, and as they ascended the spire, his power grew. The shadows parted before him, unable to withstand the brightness of his light. The resistance followed behind him, emboldened by his strength. They reached the top of the spire, where Nulmra stood, his dark robes billowing in the wind, his eyes glowing with malice. "You think you can challenge me?" Nulmra sneered, his voice like the hiss of a snake. "I am the darkness. I am the shadows. You are nothing but a flicker of light, and I will snuff you out." "You think you can challenge me?" Nulmra sneered, his voice like the hiss of a snake. "I am the darkness. I am the shadows. You are nothing but a flicker of light, and I will snuff you out." Selric stood firm, the light within him flickering and growing. He could feel the pressure of the shadows, the weight of the darkness that had ruled the kingdom for so long. But he was no longer afraid. Nulmra's words slid over him, ineffective against the calm certainty that had grown in his heart. Without warning, Nulmra lashed out, tendrils of shadow reaching for Selric, twisting and writhing like snakes. Selric raised his hand, and a brilliant beam of light shot forth, cutting through the shadows with ease. The light seared the darkness, burning it away, but Nulmra was undeterred. His magic was ancient, powerful, and uprooted in the very essence of the Shadow Kingdom. Selric pushed forward, his feet moving of their own accord as the power of light surged within him. Each step forward illuminated the room, revealing the grotesque shapes of shadow creatures that had lingered in the dark for far too long. They recoiled from the brightness, their forms withering under its purity. Nulmra snarled, his eyes glowing with fury as he conjured a massive wall of darkness, a last desperate attempt to smother the light. The shadows roared to life, swirling around him, a tempest of pure blackness that threatened to consume everything. Selric hesitated for a moment, the magnitude of Nolmra's power daunting, but Myra's voice cut through the chaos. "You are stronger than him," she cried from behind. "Remember what the light means." Selric's heart pounded, but her words ignited something within him. The light was not just a weapon, it was more. It was the balance, the harmony that the Shadow Kingdom had been denied for so long. He closed his eyes, focusing inward, and the light within him began to shift, not as a sword to cut, but as a force to heal. He took a deep breath, and when he opened his eyes again, the light was no longer a beam of destruction. It was a soft glow, spreading outward, enveloping the shadows around him. The darkness fought back, writhing and twisting, but Selric's light was patient, steady. It didn't burn the shadows, it transformed them. The shadow creatures stopped in their tracks, no longer fleeing from the light but embracing it. Their forms shifted, changing from monstrous figures into the people they once were, citizens of the Shadow Kingdom, freed from Nolmra's curse. One by one, they fell to their knees, their faces filled with awe and gratitude as they were restored. Nolmra's scream of rage echoed through the chamber. "You fool!" He spat, his hands trembling as he conjured the last of his strength. "You think you can undo what I have built? You think light can exist without darkness?" Selric didn't respond. He stepped closer, the soft glow of his light pushing the shadows back with every movement. Nolmra's form began to blur, the darkness around him fracturing, splitting apart. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. "You are right," Selric finally said, his voice calm and sure. "Light and darkness both have their place. But the balance has been lost for too long." Nolmra shrieked, lashing out in a final desperate attack. But it was too late. Selric's light engulfed him, not destroying but dissolving the dark magic that had sustained him for centuries. Nolmra's form withered, his body collapsing into the very shadows he had commanded, until all that remained was a wisp of darkness, quickly swallowed by the light. The silence that followed was deafening. Selric stood in the center of the chamber, his light still glowing softly. The shadows had receded, the darkness no longer oppressive but gentle, balanced with the soft radiance he had brought. Around him, the citizens of the Shadow Kingdom rose from where they had fallen, blinking as though waking from a long nightmare. Myra rushed to his side, her face glowing with pride and joy. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Selric smiled, but there was no triumph in his expression, only peace. "We did it," he corrected. He looked out over the crowd of restored citizens, their faces filled with hope for the first time in years. The kingdom was no longer ruled by fear and shadows, but by a balance between light and dark. The resistance members who had fought alongside them gathered, their expressions a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Kalen, the former general, stepped forward, his eyes scanning the transformed kingdom. "What now?" he asked quietly. Selric turned to him, the light within him dimming to a gentle glow. "Now, we rebuild." Together. The day of the election came. The citizens of the Shadow Kingdom, no longer shackled by fear, gathered in the central square of Umbra. It was the first true election in their history, a momentous occasion that marked the beginning of a new era. Selric stood at the edge of the square, watching as the people voted. He had been offered the presidency, the position of leadership that so many believed he deserved. But he had refused. The power of the light was not meant to rule, it was meant to guide. Kalen, the former general, was elected by the people, his strength and wisdom trusted to lead them into a balanced future. As the votes were counted and the cheers of the people filled the air, Selric turned to Myra, a soft smile on his face. "It's a new beginning," he said quietly. Myra nodded, her eyes bright with hope. "The kingdom is finally free." Selric's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the shadows and light intertwined in perfect harmony. For the first time, there was no fear in the balance, only peace. The Shadow Kingdom had found its way, and though there would be challenges ahead, they would face them together, with the strength of both light and darkness guiding them forward.